mean, as you know, I like food to be part of life. I'm not. I've never had a cookery lesson in my life. I've learnt through trial and error and enthusiasm. And
When I told my twin sister that we were going to be having this conversation, she made me promise to thank you for a particular recipe that came out of Martha's Ways with Mince, and it's a Gruyere Martha's Meals with Mince, and it's a roulade made with Gruyere cheese. I didn't suppose. Do you remember it?
I remember it. I mean, of course, that was very much the era of the roulade, which everybody would think was terribly old-fashioned.
Exactly.
But I didn't see any harm in going back to some of those old-fashioned things.
Yes,
because they were delicious often.
She was an army officer's wife in the 80s when, you're exactly right, you had to give smart dinner parties.
Yes.
And she said the great thing about this was that it looked impossibly difficult, but in fact it was easy. It's absolutely delicious, and people were incredibly impressed by it.
Well,
so I have to say thank you. She made me promise.
Oh well, I'll tell you, I'm very pleased. I mean, I think it was an advantage, actually, not having ever learnt to cook, because I didn't have special skills. I mean, I was like anybody else. Mm-hmm. It's just that I've always been greedy. I've been going back recently over something I'm writing, right back to my early diaries, and there's always this sort of thing about food, I had this delicious meal and everything, even long before I'd cooked anything. Mm-hmm. And my family have always been very creative musicians and artists, and so there's this sort of strong creative streak. And I think that, and combined with the travelling, mm-hmm. which meant that I had spices and everything by the time I was 7, made me sort of think of food in a different way. I mean, mm-hmm. I'd tasted many more things, and I then had ideas of putting them together, but not, I mean, ideas that could be done in a simple way, because I couldn't do anything in a skilled, complicated way. I could only do it, even if something was complicated, I had to make it simple, mm-hmm. for the home cook, which was me.
in your book, Orchards in the Oasis, it opens with you, I think you're just about 7 years old, and you go to Damascus.
Yes.
To meet your incredibly glamorous mother and your highly interesting stepfather.
Yes,
and
he was a character.
Do you remember you have your first experience of walking into the kitchen there? And
yes,
that's
well, I was going to read that.
Exactly,
yes.
We're looking forward to that. And I love so many things I love about it. I love the way you describe that your stepfather introduces you to frog's legs, which most children wouldn't eat, by taking you on a frog hunting expedition.
Yes, I know. But I thought that might sort of offend some people, because it sounds so sort of cruel, shoveling all these frogs into his enormous bag.
But you ate them age 7 and enjoyed them.
Oh yes. Well, I mean, frogs do taste like very mild chicken, so as long as you can get over the thing of them being... I don't think I've ever been very squeamish, actually.
What about your own grandchildren? Have you managed to persuade them to be adventurous? Because children can be so conventional.
I mean, I find them very frustrating, actually. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know my children... Well, my children weren't at all fussy until they went to school, and that would, until they were about, well, I suppose maybe nursery school, or 5 anyway. And then they came back saying that they wanted fish fingers that they'd never had, because all their friends had fish fingers, and they had to eat things that I was making. And so they sort of weren't fussy, because it was part of their home life was all these things. But directly they realised what their peers ate, they became much, much more fussy. Mm-hmm. But I find my grandchildren, it's quite annoying sometimes when all they want is pasta and broccoli.
Yes. Oh, broccoli! You can get them to eat broccoli.
Oh, broccoli! Children like broccoli. I think it's because it looks like little trees or something. They're beginning. I mean, they're getting older now, and they are beginning to branch out.
Well, you went to stay after Syria. You went back and lived with your grandmother for a while, and that was going back from Syria with all the richness and the variety to, I suppose, was rationing still in force then? Because you
I
described...
remember, yes, well, I don't know about the food rationing. I certainly remember that we... No, I'm not sure. When did it end? Because
I think in the 50s, early 50s.
Oh well, it must have been still just going on, and I remember she still kept preserved eggs in isinglass, that strange thing in a jar in the kitchen.
No, I've never had those. What are they like?
Well, I didn't think they were very nice at all, because one thing I didn't like when I was a child was eggs for some reason, and I came to them later.
I suppose the smell can be a bit off-putting.
Yes, it's not very nice, is it?
But I mean, you described, the things that I haven't eaten for ages, and I long to again. Beef dripping. When did you last have beef dripping?
Oh, I haven't for ages.
How delicious it was on toast,
Very
though,
delicious.
wasn't it great?
And with the grainy bits at the bottom. It was really, really good.
And then something that intrigued me, roast chicken, but you ate it with a frozen product called potato puffles. What are they like?
Oh, I know. Potato puffles. Potato puffles. Well, they were puffed up little things of potatoes, and I thought they were the most delicious thing ever. Well, you put them in the oven, and I mean, they were a frozen product, and then they cooked.
Would you like some now? If we could get some for you.
Well, I bet I wouldn't like them so much now.
It's like all sorts of things when I was a
then
child.
and then obviously later on I would never have done them, because I just wanted to experiment with everything myself, and then directly I began writing books. Of course, I mean, the idea of my ever buying a kind of ready done product was absolutely out of the question. And in fact, yesterday, because I have no kitchen at the moment at all, the stove just turns on, although it's all being decorated, but then the stove is covered with dust sheets and everything. But we just had to eat something in the evening because we weren't going out and couldn't get anything. And I went and got, and I think they're quite nice ones. There's a sort of ready-made fish pie. I can't remember who it's made by. And I almost was furtive in the supermarket. I thought, I mean, of course nobody would recognise it was me buying a ready-made fish pie, but I thought, oh, help, what will they think,
But there are times when nothing else will do.
Well, I mean,
I've got time to make fish
all
pie.
the implements are in boxes. I mean, there's nothing. There is this oven that underneath the dust sheets I can just turn on. So
what are your guilty secrets? Do you have your nights when you just want beans on toast?
Well, usually, I mean, for beans I get those gigantes beans, those large Spanish beans.
Oh yes.
Which you can get in tins in tomato sauce, and they're just. I mean, I adore. I don't really adore baked beans any longer, but I mean, everybody quite likes baked beans.
But it would never be Heinz. It would always be these bottles.
Well, very, very early days with baked beans, I remember was I began experimenting. Thinking, I mean, really, when I was 18 or something, and I used to put curry powder and I add things to baked beans. I mean, that was a sort of beginning of realising that I could create
make
things.
It different.
Yes.
So then I mean, skipping a bit. When you're a teenager, you go to Lanzarote.
Oh yes.
Do you remember that? I love that chapter of the book. You talk a lot about Maria.
Yes.
Your cook there, and
yes.
And she used to boil your potatoes in seawater.
Yes, and they were those lovely Canary Island little potatoes, which were tiny and always with the skin on. You never peeled them. When they're boiled in seawater, they make a sort of salt crust around the skin.
Is that something you recommend us all to do?
Well, I mean, if you live within a few yards of seawater, and I suppose if it's boiled, yes.
Have you done it in recent years? I've never thought about that.
In Devon, we didn't, and we weren't right on the sea. We were up the river, although it was salty water because it came in from Dartmouth. But I didn't do it then. But I mean, there in Lanzarote, we were literally a few yards from the sea, and also there was very, very little water, so it was very practical to use seawater.
Well, it's something I mean to try anyway. And then you come back to London and you inhabit that 1960s bedsit where you have smart young men. In fact, in the photograph, he's an impossibly beautiful looking young man.
Oh, the first boyfriend.
Yeah, the first boyfriend. And you have, as so many girls did, that minute bedsitter where you somehow or other you have to produce elegant meals, even though you've got to keep your milk on the windowsill.
Well, that was where it was
solitary burner.
my first cooking really in that bed. That kitchen was unbelievable. I mean, I think health and safety would never allow it now. It was absolutely disgusting, and it was the size of a very, very, very small lavatory. I mean, it was tiny and completely windowless and completely airless. And anyway, I did begin to produce things and pigeons and
wood pigeons.
Well, things that were cheap.
Yes,
because I was living on very. I think I'd had £10 a week to cover my whole life, to cover my clothes, my travels, my food, my rent, everything.
And cod's cheeks. Cod's cheeks you cook. Can we get those these days?
Oh, they're so delicious. And I've just discovered that opposite Macken's, the fish shop.
Yes.
They quite often do both cods and skate knobs.
What?
Well, they're skate cheeks.
Okay.
Or they're called ray now. They're not I call them skate.
And they don't look down your nose and get grumpy if you ask for them.
No. I only found the cod's cheeks the other day, and I was very excited. And they say we have them from time to time.
And is it something they display, or do they go into the back and
No, they just had them. I suddenly saw them, and they're completely delicious. I mean, they have a better texture than the whole of the rest of the fish, which is why when we were students and everything, we used to sort of fry them and pretend they were scampi, because they're terribly cheap. I mean, even now they're not expensive. Then, they literally were £6 a pound. Yes, a lot, and then as I said, pigeons were very, very cheap.
And then you talk about a restaurant that I remember so well, the Ark in Kensington Street. And I haven't been there for decades. Is it still a wooden building? It's
a wooden building, and it's called, oh God, what is it called? It's called The Shed, I think. And it has all sorts of little things, and it's still got a good atmosphere. It's somehow got a little addition next door to it, but everybody's very crowded up, as they were in the Ark, and it's rather nice food.
I have been there for years. Have you been recently?
The Shed, I think it opened about 2 or 3 years ago, and it was very, very full up. You had to book ahead. I don't know what's happened now, but we went then, and it was nice. I mean, it wasn't like the Ark used to be. But
no, it's probably a lot more expensive, because I certainly remember going and I had hardly any money.
No, exactly. No, it was well. Yes, dinner for two in really quite a smart restaurant. I remember when I was first in London, it used to cost with wine was £4 for two. With wine and not a cheap restaurant.
So in 1967, then you go to New York. You're only 24, married to David.
Yes.
And one of the places you talk about is a place that we all love, Zabar's.
Oh yes.
Isn't it great? I went there for the first time a few years ago. It's heavenly, isn't it? I didn't realise there could be so many varieties of smoked salmon.
I mean, somebody told me it's still going strong.
Yes.
It was a wonderful shop. I mean, that whole bit of New York was rather exciting. That West Side, because there were lots of Jewish shops, weren't there? And it was sort of lively.
Yeah, and the picture you paint, and something that struck home with me, I used to love the way that Americans shop for food in those brown carrier bags.
Yes.
Doesn't it make you think of Robert Redford and barefoot in the park?
Absolutely.
Somehow so much more glamorous, coming home with your celery and your bread than carrying plastic bags.
But nowadays, I don't know why. I mean, I don't know if America has now gone to plastic bags, and they used to have paper, but maybe they're still paper bags. But I mean, everybody ought to have paper bags. Then they'd say there was a terrible shortage of paper or whatever.
Well, it's from that chapter that the two classic dishes. We're all looking for several dishes, and we're all looking for the perfect recipe. Your meatloaf recipe, which I think is perfect, was that as a result of much trial and error, or did it just happen?
It just happened because I loved meatloaf. I loved blue cheese.
You can't go wrong.
like succulent things. I don't know. It just happened, and I liked it. I like flavouring things with spices and things. So, yeah.
Well, I think it's probably the best meat-loaf recipe I've done. And your cheesecake recipe as well. Do you remember that one?
Yes, well, that's because in that time in America in the 60s was the first time I'd ever had a baked cheesecake, or any cheesecake. I think. I mean, when I first heard about cheesecake, I sort of imagined something horrible, tasting of cheese. Although I love cheese, but then the baked cheesecake, I just think is fantastic, and that's another thing which is quite old-fashioned now. But I think it's coming back. I've noticed my son Henry has cheesecake, I think, in his restaurants, and it's terribly popular. So it's obviously coming back in. But baked cheesecake is much nicer than not the sort of gelatine ones and the non-baked ones.
Yeah, and I know, I agree. And all these things that are so difficult, we don't eat anymore. When you talk about going to India and Morocco, you talk quite a lot about brains and sweetbreads, both of which I love, and I can't remember the last time I saw them in a butcher's here in England.
Well, they do turn up in sort of halal butchers.
Oh, do
yes, yeah, as well sweetbreads and also testicles.
Well, never cooked testicles.
Well, I haven't cooked testicles, but I have had them. I mean, they're quite nice and sort of nice.
They have the whole sheep's heads in the butchers that I use on the Uxbridge Road, and I went onto the internet and there's a YouTube about cooking with it, but it takes an inordinate amount of time.
What, to make sort of brawn or something out of it?
Well, no, you actually...
Or just cook the whole thing?
Cook the whole thing.
Oh my goodness.
And there seems to be precious little meat on it anyway. But,
yes.
So, and then this idyllic life in Devon, would it be on the River Dart?
On the River Dart, yes.
Was that anywhere near where Floyd...
Yes, we used to see him
his pub
in the local pub, propping up the bar.
And he ran a pub there, didn't he?
He ran a pub, yes, at Tuckenhay, and that's where we used to see him. And I remember him saying about recipes. I talked to him about sort of guessing, how, because I think I was doing Sainsbury books by then, and they were absolutely meticulous about having to specify almost every grain of salt that you put in, and getting all the measurements right. And Floyd, who had already had a few drinks, then said, "Oh, I can't do it. I can't do it."
I know he was supposed to be
but
very...
I think there would have been a few minions sort of getting the measurements right for him.
Well, I have a lovely story. He was supposed to be a very difficult man. We had friends who had a house on that part of the river, and their daughters and mine, they're only about 7 or 8, would scull down to his pub, and he'd treat them like princesses.
Yes.
He'd probably be frightfully rude to all sorts of rich people, but he'd hand these little girls out of the boat.
Very nice, yes.
And sit them down and serve them their lemonade. And
I think he was a nice man. A few too many drinks sometimes.
Yeah. We were talking earlier about the people that you admire. Who are the people that you read for pleasure, who read about food?
Well, for pleasure, I mean, people like Claudia, and I don't read enormous amounts of cookery books, because I sort of think about it. I think about food in my own head an awful lot, and I pick up. Sometimes I sort of skim through things and I think that's a fantastic idea, and then I can do something else. But actually, for reading, I used to love reading Jane Grigson. And I love people who write about life.
Yes, food and I wonder. I quite agree. I wonder if you know my great heroine, MFK Fisher.
Oh yes, yes.
Wonderful?
Well, I used to read her. Yes. Well, that's life, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Well, my favourite story. She writes about having her eye on this man. She's divorced and living in Sonoma, but he never goes anywhere without his 2 best buddies, who are all 3 of them great foodies. So, to cut a very long story short, she has to invite all 3 of them, and she spends ages cooking this very, very subtle lamb curry with the perfect combination of spices. And they arrive, and he walks straight into her kitchen, picks the lid off the pot, and says, "Oh, this won't do," and grabs a jar of curry after and puts
Oh,
it in.
oh dear, how awful.
End of all the romance.
Yes, I should
He's
think
not the man
so.
for her, and the carefully chosen beer gets scorned in favour of champagne. So when she waves them off down the valley, she's more than relieved to see the back of them.
I love having food conversations. I think when I used to go on when I was writing for the Telegraph, and I went on quite a lot of press trips, food press trips, and I loved it then that you used to have these sort of orgasmic conversations about food.
And it's deeply nostalgic too, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
And I was asking you about potato puffles. And get me started on all sorts of things like sandwich spread, which I remember in sandwiches.
I hated sandwich
Did
spread.
you?
I really hated because I came, because of my not liking eggs early on. I came quite slowly to mayonnaise. I mean, I adore mayonnaise now. I mean, proper mayonnaise. But sandwich spread. I just felt that it looked and tasted like sick.
Mm-hmm. Well, it did have that. So you weren't a great fan of salad cream then?
No,
it's horrid, isn't it? I remember it so well. And tinned cream, do you remember that? Where you had to shake it to just sort of get it to solidify.
Oh no, but what I did absolutely love was evaporated milk.
Yes, I adore it. I love it now in coffee.
I could actually drink it. Oh, and do you know if you still like evaporated milk, in the sort of Middle Eastern shops, well, Axby Road and Dammasgate and everything, you can get little tins of cardamom milk. It's called.
Can you?
And it's evaporated milk, flavoured with cardamom.
I should go straight up there.
It's absolutely delicious.
So, if you your last meal on earth, what would it be?
I think I've always sort of thought it would have to be comfort food. It would probably have to, who knows what kind of state I was in. It would probably have to be something I could eat easily. And so maybe
let's assume that
fish pie.
I love fish pie.
I mean, fish pie is just, I mean, a good fish pie is wonderful.
So you must have written a good few fish pie recipes. Do you have?
Yes, I have. I mean, I've done all sorts of ones. And I think I like best, like with sort of fish stews, I like making a sauce and then dropping the fish in so that it doesn't get too overcooked and it's just cooked. And then making the top out of potatoes or sweet potatoes and potatoes, or I put all sorts of other all sorts of tops and putting that under the grill.
It's got to be potato, hasn't it?
Well, I think for a real fish pie, yes, exactly. And then that's a kind of fish pie. I mean, it's a different kind of fish pie, but it's a fish pie when nothing's overcooked. I mean, the fish is all has its proper shape and.
Yes. So, which one of your books will you find your all-time ultimate favourite?
Oh, I don't know. There are
all sorts of different. Remember, you've let me because I'd love to.
There are all sorts of different ones. Yeah, and I can't really remember which is the best one. I mean, I do like sort of traditional fish pie which has peas in it too. I think that's very nice.
And I agree, frozen peas. Yes. In my case, they have to be.
Yes.
Frozen peas
and a bit of smoked fish.
Yes.
With that's always nice. I don't mind if it doesn't have prawns in it. I mean, it's a great treat. Obviously, if it has scallops.
Ah, yes. So, are you an oysters person? Do you like oysters?
I had a bad oyster once in New Orleans and was really ill. So I'm still a bit nervous. So, I mean, I have had them about raw oysters, but I adore warm oysters, like they do a lot in Mexico, and they put spice on the top and they put them onto the grill.
Oh, right.
And I've had warm oysters. In fact, I've used warm oysters, sort of also dropping them into.
So I've never tried that. Have you ever been to the oyster bar at Grand Central Station where they have 60 different varieties?
Yes, I mean I have with David when we lived in New York, and because he adores oysters, but I always used to have clam chowder because that was famous.
With those little biscuits that.
Yes. Yeah.
So have you ever found that you could share a kitchen with a man? I find that very difficult.
Well, I do now, because I mean, what is amazing now is that I have this friend, I hate the word partner, called Johnny, and he's actually a very good cook, but he, to me, he's the most wonderful sous chef that ever has been, because I mean, all my married life, I sort of did everything myself, and I almost forced people away. I just wanted to do it all, and everything, including washing up everything. I must have been mad, I think. But anyway, now, if I'm beginning to cook supper, and Johnny comes in, sort of wordlessly, he doesn't have to ask me. He just sees that such and such needs to be chopped up, and he begins doing it. And
sounds perfect.
It's just brilliant. It's very, very nice thing to find later in life when I'd like a bit more help.
I'm sure. I'd never had a son, but if I had ever had a son, I'd certainly teach him to cook, because any man can throw a credit card across the table, but to be cooked for,
I was very bad.
Very special, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. But I was very bad at teaching my children to cook, because I was always doing these recipes, and used to actually. I loved them being part of the creative thing, the dish, saying what they liked, and especially when they were eating it, sort of making constructive comments and everything. I hate meals when people don't mention the food. I think it's awful. If somebody's actually cooked something, you've just got to mention the food. But I was bad at teaching my own children, but they absorbed it, and they're all good cooks now. And Henry's gone on. His life is food now.
Tell us about Henry.
Well, he has a chain of healthy fast food restaurants called Leon.
He's Leon. I had no idea your son loved Leon.
Yes, and he's very. He says that he's been really influenced by me, although I never actually taught him to cook. But he just absorbed it.
It's a certainly highly international style of cooking, isn't it?
Yes. Well, he got that from me. See,
yes,
he said at the beginning, it did start with what he'd been inspired by my sort of cooking.
There was anything new left to do in fast food.